Welcome to my channel. Do you think fashion is only about clothes? What if I told you that one woman changed the entire world, not just how we dress, but how we live and think? Today, we're diving into the real story of Coco Chanel. It's not just a story of luxury and style. It's a powerful journey of survival, secrets, and strength. Keep watching, because you're about to learn something that most people don't know, even about the woman behind the famous Chanel number. 5 Perfume. Chapter 1. Coco's Dark Beginnings. The orphan who dared to dream. Gabrielle Bonheur Chanel, the girl who would one day become Coco, was born on August 19th, 1883, in a small town called Saumur in France. But her early life was nothing like the world of luxury she would later create. In fact, her childhood was filled with struggle and sadness. Her mother worked as a laundrywoman, and her father was a street vendor who sold clothing. Life was hard. There was no wealth, no fame, no glamour, just poverty. When Gabrielle was only 11 years old, her mother died of illness. Soon after, her father left. He didn't die. He simply disappeared, leaving Gabrielle and her siblings behind. They were sent to an orphanage run by Catholic nuns. This was the beginning of a very different kind of life. The orphanage was strict, cold, and silent. The girls followed rules, prayed, and worked. But this is where Gabrielle learned how to sew. She watched the nuns and learned to stitch and cut fabric with care. Little did anyone know, this simple skill, sewing, would one day turn a poor orphan into a global fashion icon. But at this point, she was just a girl trying to survive. She didn't have fancy clothes. She didn't have dreams of fame. She only had thread, a needle, and a quiet determination that she didn't yet understand. That's what makes her story powerful. As a teenager, Gabrielle left the orphanage and started working as a seamstress. During the evenings, she sang in small bars and cabarets, places where soldiers and rich young men went to drink and laugh. This is where she picked up the name Coco. Some say it came from a song she used to sing called Qui qu'a vu Coco. Others believe it was a nickname given by one of her lovers. The truth? We don't really know, but Coco liked it, and she kept it. Now let's stop and think for a moment. This young woman had no parents, no money, no powerful friends. But what she did have was a dream, one that was still forming inside her. She didn't want to stay poor. She didn't want to follow the rules that society gave to women at the time. She wanted more. And slowly, the world started to open a small door for her. Coco began to meet people, important people, through her job as a singer. And one day, she met Etienne Balsan, a rich man who owned horses and had a big estate. He invited her into his world, and for the first time, Coco Chanel saw how the rich lived. She rode horses, she wore fancy hats, she talked to people who had power. But here's the important part. She didn't just enjoy the lifestyle. She studied it. She observed how women dressed, how they moved, and how they were trapped by their own clothes. Tight corsets, big hats, and heavy gowns. Coco didn't like it. And soon, she began to imagine a different kind of woman, one who was free to move, to think, to live without limits. This is where the first sparks of her fashion ideas began, but it was still just the beginning. She wasn't a designer yet. She didn't have a shop. She didn't even know how to run a business. But she was watching, learning, and waiting. The world didn't see her as a future legend. She was just a woman with a different point of view. At the end of this chapter in her life, Coco is still living under someone else's roof. She doesn't yet have her own name in the world. But everything is about to change. Because soon, she will meet a man who believes in her talent. He will give her the money she needs to open her first store. And from that moment, Coco Chanel will no longer be just a nickname. It will become a brand, a symbol. But behind that symbol is still the orphan girl, the outsider, the dreamer who dared to imagine a new world for women. What happens next will surprise you. Don't go anywhere, because the real story of Coco Chanel is just getting started. Chapter 2: Love, War, and Fashion. The making of Coco Chanel. When Coco Chanel met Etienne Balsan, her life took a new direction. Living in his beautiful country estate, surrounded by wealth and high society, Coco experienced comfort for the first time. She was no longer just the poor girl from the orphanage. But still, she was not satisfied. Coco was never the kind of woman to simply enjoy luxury. She wanted to create something of her own. She didn't want to be someone's guest. She wanted to be independent. That's when she began designing hats, not just for fun, but for real clients. At first, she made them for her friends and women in Balsan's social circle. But these hats were different. They were simple, elegant, and bold. In a time when women wore large, decorated hats, Coco's designs were modern and fresh, and people noticed. Then came a turning point in her life: the arrival of Arthur Boy Capel. He was a friend of Balsan's, handsome, rich, and different from other men. Capel saw something special in Coco. He didn't just like her, he believed in her. He encouraged her ideas and supported her dream of becoming more than a mistress in someone else's house. With his financial help, Coco opened her first shop in Paris in 1910. It was small, just a space to sell her hats, but it was hers. Her name was on the door. This was a big moment. The little orphan girl was now a businesswoman. But Coco didn't stop at hats. She wanted to dress the modern woman, and she believed that women should feel comfortable, free, and strong. She looked at men's clothes and thought, "Why can't women wear this?" So she began designing simple dresses, loose trousers, and elegant jackets using materials like jersey, which was normally used for men's underwear. People thought she was crazy, but women loved it. They could breathe, they could move, they could work. This was fashion with purpose, and Coco Chanel was leading the change. Then, in 1914, World War I broke out. Life in Europe changed overnight. The men went to fight, and women had to take their place in factories, offices, and hospitals. The old-fashioned, tight corsets, long skirts, heavy fabrics no longer made sense. Coco saw the opportunity. She designed clothes that fit this new life. Her style wasn't just fashionable, it was necessary. And so, while the world was at war, her business grew. But even as her career soared, her personal life faced heartbreak. Arthur Boy Capel, the man who had believed in her from the beginning, died in a car accident in 1919. Coco was devastated. She once said that Capel's death was the biggest loss of her life. But instead of giving up, she poured her energy into work. She expanded her brand, opened more shops, and began designing everything from clothing to accessories. She created the idea of total look, where a woman could wear Chanel from head to toe. This period of her life is where we see the transformation. Coco is no longer just a designer. She's becoming a symbol of change. Women across Europe, and soon the world, look at her and see something new. A woman who lives on her own terms. She doesn't marry. She doesn't depend on a man. She runs her own business, hires other women, and sets new rules. What makes this chapter so fascinating is the mix of love, loss, and creation. Coco didn't have a perfect life. She didn't follow a clear plan. But through pain and passion, she built something lasting. And still, she wasn't finished. Because soon, she would launch a product that would not just carry her name, but make history. This product wouldn't be a dress or a hat. It would be a small glass bottle. Inside, it would carry a scent that would become a legend. And once again, Coco Chanel would prove that fashion isn't only about what we wear. It's about how we feel, how we live, and how we remember. Stay with me, because in the next chapter, we explore the magic and mystery behind Chanel number 5 and the secrets Coco tried to keep hidden. Chapter 3. Chanel number 5. Fame and the Shadow of Secrets. By the early 1920s, Coco Chanel had already become a name that people whispered with admiration. Her fashion was modern, elegant, and powerful. But Coco wasn't done. She had a new idea, one that had never been done before. She wanted to create a perfume. At that time, perfume was something only the rich could afford, and it was often overpowering, made from heavy floral scents. Coco wanted something different. She wanted a scent that smelled clean, fresh, and modern, just like her clothes. But more than that, she wanted it to represent the new woman, confident, stylish, and free. In 1921, Coco met Ernest Beau, a talented Russian-French perfumer. He showed her different samples, but one of them stood out. It was sample number 5. Coco loved it immediately. It was different. It had layers. It combined natural flowers with synthetic ingredients to create something totally new. This scent didn't smell like a single flower. It smelled like a whole idea. When Beau asked her what to name it, she said simply, "Number 5. Why? Because it was her lucky number. That's it. No fancy names. Just Chanel number 5. When Chanel number 5 launched, it was revolutionary. The bottle was simple and elegant, nothing like the ornate bottles used by other brands. It was clean, modern, and powerful, just like Coco. And the scent? Women loved it. Men remembered it. It became a signature, something instantly recognizable. For many, it wasn't just a perfume, it was a statement. To wear Chanel number 5 was to say, I am different. I am strong. I am free. The success was immediate. Chanel No. 5 became one of the best-selling perfumes of all time. But behind the scent was a complicated story, a story of business, betrayal, and secrets. Coco made a deal with the Wertheimer brothers, two businessmen who helped produce and distribute the perfume. In return, they got most of the profits. At first, Coco didn't fully understand how much she was giving away. Years later, she tried to take control of the business again, but the deal was legal. The perfume carried her name, but most of the money didn't go to her. This part of her story is where we see Coco's business side, sharp, tough, and determined. She didn't just want to be the face of the brand. She wanted control. She fought hard to get more power, even if it meant working with people she didn't trust. She was no longer just a designer. She was an empire. But with success came more secrets and controversy. During World War II, Coco's fashion business slowed down. In 1939, she closed her shops, saying that war was no time for fashion. But she didn't leave Paris. And this is where her story takes a darker turn. Coco moved into the Hotel Ritz, a luxury hotel in Paris that was also home to many Nazi officers during the German occupation of France. She began a romantic relationship with a German officer named Hans Günther von Dinklage, who was also believed to be a spy. This relationship raised many questions after the war. Was Chanel just trying to survive? Or was she involved in political actions that helped the Nazis? After the war, she was arrested and questioned by French authorities, but she was released and never officially charged. Some say it was because of her connections. Others believe she made deals behind closed doors. The truth remains unclear, and historians still debate her actions during this time. But one thing is certain: her image was damaged. Chanel left Paris and moved to Switzerland for several years, staying quiet, away from the spotlight. This chapter of Coco's life shows us something important. Even legends are human. They make mistakes. They have secrets. They live complicated lives. Coco Chanel built a brand based on independence, power, and elegance. But behind the scenes, she made choices that were controversial and sometimes painful. And yet, her story doesn't end here. Many thought her time had passed, that the world had moved on. But Coco wasn't finished. She was about to make one final comeback, one that would prove that true style never fades. So don't go anywhere. Because in the next chapter, we'll see how Coco Chanel, at the age of 70, shocked the world once again. This is the final part of her journey, and it's one you won't want to miss. Chapter 4: Legacy, Lies, and the Woman Who Never Married. In 1954, Coco Chanel was 70 years old. For most people, that would be the time to retire, to rest, to look back on life. But Coco wasn't like most people. She had been living quietly in Switzerland since the end of World War II, away from the fashion world, away from the drama of Paris. Many people believed her time was over. The fashion scene had moved on. New designers were leading the industry, especially Christian Dior, who had introduced a style called the New Look. Tight waists, big skirts, and a return to a more traditional feminine image. But Coco didn't like it. She believed women had already fought for freedom, and this new fashion was like going backwards. So she made a bold decision. She would come back. When Coco Chanel returned to Paris in 1954 to launch a new collection, The response was cold. Critics didn't welcome her. Some remembered her rumored involvement with the Nazis. Others thought her designs were old-fashioned. The press wrote harsh reviews. People said she had lost her magic. But Coco didn't care. She wasn't designing for the critics. She was designing for the woman she believed in. Smart, simple, elegant, and strong. Slowly, her new collection started gaining attention. American buyers in particular loved it. They saw what Coco was trying to do. She was reminding the world of timeless style, and the world began to listen. Her comeback proved that true talent never goes out of style. She reintroduced the things she was famous for: the tweed jacket, the little black dress, and of course, Chanel number 5. Younger generations started to admire her. They saw a woman who had lived through poverty, war, scandal, and heartbreak, but who still stood tall, still worked every day, and still believed in her vision. Coco worked up until her final years, designing, sketching, and managing her business from her apartment in the Hotel Ritz, the same hotel she had lived in since the 1930s. Coco Chanel never married. She once said, "I never wanted to weigh more heavily on a man than a bird." For her, freedom was more important than romance. She had many relationships in her life, but she always returned to herself and her work. Some say she was lonely. Others say she simply loved her independence. Maybe both are true. But what's clear is that Coco built a life that was entirely her own. She passed away in 1971, at the age of 87, in her suite at the Ritz, still surrounded by her sketches and fabrics. Her death marked the end of a chapter, but not the end of her story. Because even today, more than 50 years later, the name Chanel still lives on. Not just as a brand, but as a symbol of elegance, power, and change. Coco Chanel didn't just change fashion, she changed the way women saw themselves. She taught us that beauty doesn't have to be uncomfortable, that confidence is the best thing you can wear, that it's okay to break the rules, to stand out, and to be different. Her clothes gave women freedom at a time when society wanted to keep them small and quiet. But her story is not perfect. It's full of contradictions. She was a woman who fought for freedom, yet lived in luxury. She created beauty, but carried deep pain. She inspired millions, but also had secrets she never explained. That's what makes her real. That's what makes her human. Coco Chanel was not just a fashion designer. She was a woman of strength, mystery, and vision. So the next time you see the double C logo or smell Chanel number 5, remember? It's not just a brand, it's a life story. A story of an orphan who became a queen. A story of love, war, fashion, and survival. A story that still speaks to us today. Thank you for watching this far. If you learned something new today or just enjoyed the story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. What part of Coco Chanel's life surprised you the most? Was it her childhood, her love life, her comeback, or her secrets? Let me know. I love hearing your thoughts. And don't forget to turn on the bell icon so you never miss more real-life English stories like this one. See you in the next video.